suppose, Greg, if I were to be totally honest, um, I actually didn't choose a career, so to speak, in hairdressing. Um, Back at that age of 15 years of age, where you think you know everything, you think you have all the answers, and I had the determination to get out of schooling. And the only stipulation my father put in place was that so long as you have work, you can then leave school. So I set out on a mission to get a job, not so much thinking about a career, just simply to get a job. And believe it or not, called into a hairdressing salon, met with the salon owner, and the following day she contacted me, and she was effectively, I suppose, that was the first job I was offered. And I thought, happy days, get out of school. I'd no idea what to expect, none whatsoever. And I ventured into hairdressing. And yeah, Dolores took my assessment. Uh, Thankfully, it all went well, and therefore joined up with Peter Mark.
Well, I suppose to be fair, Greg, I grew up with hairdressing from the time I was a very young age. I mean, my mum's a hairdresser. Obviously, my dad's just giving you his background there. So from a very, very young age, hairdressing was something that was always spoken about in the house. It was something that was, I've been in and out of salons over the years where my mum worked and my dad worked. So we would have followed my mum and dad, you know, into hairdressing from the point of view of that been around salons pretty much most of our life. So they both tried to encourage me not to go into hairdressing. So there was two really kind of paths for me. When I finished school, I was either hairdressing or I was into cars, and I was really, really into cars at the time. So it's fair to say I tried both. I went into the car industry which didn't last very long, a couple of weeks. And the very simple reason for that is that I work Monday to Friday in the car industry. And then on Saturdays, I used to be brought into the salon. And it's fair to say the difference in the salon, the whole idea of getting, you know, dressed up to go to work, the whole fun of the salon, working kind of with a balance of male and female rather than being in a set of overalls under a car was quite nice. So finished school, then it was safe to say went into Peter Mark, and I spent 3 years in Peter Mark basically doing exactly what Liam done as best I possibly could to further myself education wise. And it's fair to say I had a fantastic education within Peter Mark.
Well, Greg, I just never wanted to do anything else. It's just what I wanted to be from a very young age. I vividly remember being at home in the house in Bray, blow drying Chinese ears, the doll, and burning the head off her. I vividly remember it like I was probably about 7 or 8. And then it's just in me from that age, really, that I wanted to be in the hairdressing industry. There was no doubt about it.
No hairdressing in the background or anything, no family in hairdressing?
My aunt was a hairdresser, and she used to come through every couple of months and do my mum's perm. And, you know, a perm and a set and, you know, stink the house out. And so definitely would have been influenced by her for sure. But it was just in me. I just wanted to be a hairdresser. And I was bright in school. I wasn't a complete dumbass, but I definitely, I had no choice. I just wanted to do hair. Even in like doing hair in school on lunch breaks, I was doing blow dry at the end of the classroom, you know? So that was where I wanted to be. And I fought tooth and nail to get there, you know?
As you said, Greg, you know, family ties there. As you mentioned, our mum was a hairdresser and always will be. She's still with us, thanks be to God. Oh. My mum done hairdressing while I was in school, and I would have always been around that. So, you know, that was always there. But it wasn't my sort of first love at the time. It was more influence than anything else. I did want to go on to be an architect, stayed on in school, done the Leaving Cert, was going to go to college, went into work where my father worked, which was the independent newspapers at the time. Didn't particularly like that. And my cousin Mary was working in a very trendy salon at the time in Toppy's in the Irish Life Mall. It was one of the first shopping centres in the city. And it was something that I thought, well, always wanted to travel, know a bit of hairdressing. Went to work with my cousin in Steiner, and that was the start of me.
It was a little bit like, as Paul explained, our mum's a hairdresser, and, you know, been at home and always having that influence around with my mum, and then Paul obviously starting And I had to do something besides kick a ball on the street. So my mum got Paul to drag me into the salon one Saturday. And I started in Mary Street. Paul was just moving on up to Grafton Street at the time. And yourself was there, and Alison, and Peter McDonald. And I really liked it. I was still in school at the time, and done 2 years, and then left school just after the junior certs or inter cert, whatever it was then. And I started my career there.
I suppose I didn't really choose hairdressing. It more chose me. I wanted to do loads of things. Like I wanted to be a photographer, a makeup artist, a clothes designer. Like anything was really like working with my hands. And I suppose in school I did the Leaving Cert Applied. So what you do in that is you actually do work experience. So I was able to like go into different things like beauty therapy. I did mechanics for a while. I worked in an MOT office. I did bar work. And then I went into hairdressing. And that's where I fell in love with it straight away. And like everything I do now is part of like I would like control shoots where I would direct like the makeup artist, the clothes designer, the photography of it, the editing of it, the hair, the makeup. So I kind of do everything that I kind of wanted to do. And that's where I love the industry because it's so wide open and you're not just behind the chair all the time. You can choose just to be behind the chair, but I really felt like my career, I wanted to expand it and do so much with it. And I remember my career guidance teacher saying to me, I went in with my portfolios and said, if I'm going to be a makeup artist, this is my portfolio. If I'm going to be a fashion designer, this is my portfolio. And she was just kind of looking at me going, you don't really know what you want to do yet. So you need to pick the right work experiences to actually see what you want to do. I think I want to be a mechanic. Like, I really think I wanted to be a mechanic. And my first day out in the job, the lads in the shop were like, you go out there and change oil underneath this car, you just hold this drum underneath it. And I opened it, and I had a brand new pair of overalls on, and I opened the thing, and I got soaked in oil, and I was like, I'm not doing this for a living. I was very disappointed really in the advice that was out there. There was nowhere really to go, like for like even like for an apprenticeship, or it was hard enough to get into salons. You could get in as a Saturday girl, but that was it. You there was nowhere there to train, or nobody there to teach you or guide you or anything. And I remember I went to London. I was born in London, and I have a lot of family over there, so I'd go over and back quite a lot. So I went over to my cousin, and she says, come on down, I'll bring you down into the West End, and we'll go into Sassoon's, and we'll see what's over there. Like, she says, because if you want to be a hairdresser, she goes, I know you'll want to be at the top of your game, you'll want everything. She says, this is what it is in London, it's Sassoon's. So I went in, and I remember like I just loved the environment, I loved the style, the fashion, and I was a really Camden girl now. I was really goth back in the day, and I remember going in, and I met, I think it was the receptionist, and she said, you know, there's an 8-month waiting list to get in here. And I just thought, I was so disheartened. I was like, oh, where am I ever going to find somewhere where I can actually break into and actually start like a good career? So I came back to Ireland, and I had my hair cut in a blunt bob with a fringe, and went into a few salons, dropped off my CV, and somebody had advised me to go in and meet with this girl. So I actually went in and booked an appointment with her to do my hair. And I said to her, now, I've been over in Sassoon's, I said, and I've had my hair cut in Vidal Sassoon's. I said, I actually have a CV here, and I'm looking for somebody to train me, and somebody has given me your name. I said, rather than having an interview with you, I said, I'd come in, see how you are cutting my hair. This is the salon owner, like. So she was like, I've actually trained in Sassoon's. So I was like, yeah, I know that. I said, but I want to see what you can do. So this is how the interview went. So she said, I tell you what, she says, come back, leave your CV there, and come back to me after school one of the days and dress in black. Come in and see how you fit in with the team. So I went in, and I loved it. I loved everything about it. I loved the atmosphere. I loved the clients. I loved the girl even who, her name is Liz Greer, and she's been one of my mentors like since day one. Like, and she said, what do you really want out of hairdressing? And I said, well, what I want is I want to own my own salon and run my own salon one day. and I want you to teach me how to do that. And she says,
What
well,
were
I
you
can teach
doing
you
then?
how to do that.
How old were you then?
15.
I actually didn't choose hairdressing, and that's being quite honest. The weirdest thing is that I've actually grown up with hairdressing all my life. My mother had salons. I would leave primary school and go and do my homework in the back of the salon with some of the staff. When I went to secondary school, I'd be in the salon after school, again, doing homework. Again, my mum probably wouldn't finish work until 6, maybe 7 some nights. So I'd be there after school from about 4 o'clock doing homework and then basically heading home. So really hairdressing didn't really come into it until I think I was about 15 at the time, and we got an option in school to basically do a week's work experience. And I thought, this is the perfect opportunity for me to spend a week in bed. So my cue there was sign up, tell them I was going to work in my mum's salon for a week and basically stay in bed. So unfortunately, what ended up happening then was she knew exactly what I was at, because she pretty much knew everything that I was at anyway. So the first morning I was supposed to start work in her salon, she had arranged me to go and work in one of the very large city centre salons in the middle of Derry. And so I was kicked out of bed at 7 o'clock in the morning. Ended up in this strange environment at 9 o'clock on the Monday morning, or I think it could have been, yeah, it was a Monday morning. And basically it was, for about the first few hours, it was, I was comfortable in salons because I'd already been in my mum's salon, but this was different. I mean, the girls were, it was a different
rock and roll, Mark.
It was a different level to the girls who were working in my own mum's salon. So to be quite honest, the idea that I had any interest in hairdressing was I had no thought in my head. As I say, the whole idea was to get a week off school, which I was always happy to do. Never really had a great affinity with authority, as you well know, Gregor. So you can imagine how my relationship with some of my teachers were. But here I was, ended up in a salon for a week. Absolutely loved it. Loved the crack, even though most of the crack for the first week was actually directed at me. And then after the first week, again, still at school, and basically John came to me at the end, John Deary, who actually owned the salon. He was an incredibly cool guy. You know what I mean? So that was my first experience to, the industry outside of my mum's salon and what salon she had. So it was kind of like a different type of salon.
Well, I initially didn't really choose hairdressing. I wanted to be a footballer. I left school early, didn't do my leaving cert, and I was actually a very good footballer. And my mum said, look, if you're going to pursue this, you're going to need a part-time job if you leave school. She recommended I go to hairdressing. I started working in Petermark in the Ilac Centre. I lasted about 2 weeks. Just couldn't get my head around it. Ended up leaving and told my mum I was going back to school. And I remember walking to get the bus to school one day, and I started to miss the smell of hairspray and the smell of damp towels. Now, I know this sounds really weird for any of you newbies, but it was just that smell, and I ended up missing the staff room and the buzz of the girls and the buzz of the team. And at that stage in Petermark in the Ilac, just to paint the picture, there was over 30 Saturday part-time assistants. That was without the rest of the staff. And I went back. and I sort of just fell in love with hairdressing. I was never any good at it, but I loved the passion, the enthusiasm, fashion. Initially, you think of the girls, but then you become friends with the girls. So that goes out the window. I love the fact that, you know, it was a way to you know, make yourself be seen. And I felt that these people were so empowering. You know, they were all self-sufficient. They were all self-made. They were all living a better life than most of the people I knew. They went on better holidays, drove better cars, dressed better. And I was just blown away with them. And that was me. I was in
hairdressing.
Basically, what inspired me to kind of join hairdressing was I kind of came in from a different angle. So I was never into hair. I was always came from a world of dance and drama and stage work, because that's where I grew up. I was a very competitive dancer, and I went on to do a lot more kind of singing, dance and that. So I was always very outgoing. I lived in London for 2 years, and I remember coming home from London, and all my pals were talking about this hair salon that had opened in town, and it was the place to be. It was happening. 2 of my friends had actually got apprenticeships, and I was like, all right. And I knew it was only at the starting up, but I you know, hadn't a clue. So I was like, oh, here I'm getting myself in there. I could see them doing the best of gear, decked out, and they never stopped talking about the place. They loved it. So I went in, and obviously I was like, listen, you know, is there any interviews going? What's the story? Kind of hinting around the area of I'd like to do maybe front of house. Didn't want to, you know, throw myself in case they were like, no, there's nothing here for you. But I had set with David and Catherine, David's wife, and we kind of had a general conversation, and I was like, I think I'd like to get involved in this. And I knew they were very competitive hairdressers, which I loved, because coming from a competitive dance world, I was like, you compete in a hairdressing industry? Like, what way does this go? So that really, really struck a chord with me. So, you know, they took me under their wing. They put me in front of house, which I absolutely loved. Now, I was no good at it, because that in itself, Greg, is a skill. That is a skill. What I learned very early on is that I have a really, really, they all kind of ironed it out now, had a big problem with numbers and decimal points. I did automatically feel when I was in House of Colour, it was the Liffey Street branch, I was like, this is where I'm meant to be. This is like, I felt they were all so warm, and, you know, it was like a family environment. So I remember the first competition, it was the L'Oreal Colour Trophy that I went to. And I remember standing there on the sidelines, and I've said it before, I've never seen beauty and style the way I seen it that day. And I just thought, I want to be in this industry. I don't want to be front of house. I want to compete. I love the fashion. I love the models. This is where I want to be. So the following Monday, I went in, knocked on the office door, and I said, David, can we talk? He's like, oh, you're leaving? And I was like, no, I'm all in. I want an apprenticeship. So he set me down, and he was like, if we're going to do this, we're going to do it right. And we did the interview, and he said, I want you to go home and talk to your parents about it. And there's no messing, like you're all in or you're not in. There's no messing here. Like, that's from the jump. I started my first day in the apprenticeship in Liffey Street, and I will never forget to this day the warmth of the salon members, because I was embarrassed going in, because I was thinking, oh my God, I'm dropping in wages, I'm coming down, I'm starting from the get-go. And to this day, it was the best thing I ever did.
Well, I suppose at the time I was living in Donegal. I was at college in Donegal, and I had an aunt who was hairdressing in London, and she came back to open her own salon in the town I lived in. I was just finishing my leaving cert at the time, and effectively I had a job to walk into, and it wasn't that I dreamt of being a hairdresser. I didn't. Hairdressing salon opened, and I got a job, and I started working there. So it was as simple as that. It just came out of the blue.
And that was, and what made you? When did I need to move to Dublin? When did that come then? Like, did you finish your training outside of Dublin?
Yeah, I did a year in Donegal, and after spending a year in a salon in Donegal, I knew it was time to move. So then I moved, and that's when I started with Peter Mark in Dublin. I started with Peter Mark in O'Connell Street at that stage. I remember the interview with Mark Cleaveney. He had no job. And he sent me round the corner in North Earl Street to an upstairs salon to I can't remember the name of the guy, to see if he told me he would have a job. He was looking for someone. And I remember going up the stairs in this salon in North Earl Street, and I thought to myself, I don't want to work here. So I went back to Mark and said he had no jobs. And he looked at me and he gave me a start. So it was as simple as that.
Greg, I never had any interest. I didn't even know what hairdressing was as such. I knew what a barber shop was from getting my own hair cut. But I'll give you the version of it in any way. And that is that I come from a working family. There's 11 of us in the family. My mum and dad worked very hard all their life. My dad worked very hard in Guinness's. What happened was I didn't want to stay in school. I had no interest in school. I couldn't learn. I can only learn from things that I'm interested in. And I just wasn't interested. But I didn't want to be sitting at home either. And what happened was my mum came in with the paper one time. It was the Herald, the Evening Herald at the time. And look at all these jobs for hairdressing. And I said, well, anything. Because we weren't getting on well at home, because I was sitting at home all day. I was the only one at home. Younger kids were in school and the older ones were working. I didn't get the full idea of working, how it all went. I thought I could leave school. So anyway, I went for the jobs. The first one was for a salon called Vince's Palace. His name was Vince Corrigan. And a lot of people used to go into the salon. The salon was opposite Eason's side door, upstairs. And I went up the stairs. And as I was going up the stairs, Joe Dolan was coming down. And I had a peep in through the window. And there was net curtains on the door. And I saw people with blue stuff in their hair. And rollers. Oh, this is strange. So I turned around to walk back out. And a girl came to the door, Louise Murray, who actually turned out to be from Racool, not a million miles away from where I live. And she asked, could she help me? Because she thought I was loitering. And I didn't want her thinking that. So I told her the truth, what I was there for. And of course, it was in 1974, and I got the job immediately, especially a fella, especially a fella getting the job. If I didn't like it, I could have changed it in my lunch hour. There were so many, and they were taking on juniors left, right, so. And I was very lucky that she came to that door, because I would have walked away and I wouldn't have went back. I was there for about, look, I don't like saying this, but I was let go from 3 of my jobs, my first 3 jobs. Not for anything wrong, not for doing anything wrong, but they could let you go in them days for fiddly things. But anyway, I remember my mum saying when I was about 3 weeks at hairdressing, how are you getting on there? Yeah, Grant. That's it, Grant. Do you like it? I started thinking, I said, I actually do like it. Yeah, I really do like it, She said, you could be very good at that. I started to get ideas about myself, and I said, I actually think I could be. She says, that's the type of job where you could be a manager. Well, I could feel me trousers starting to fall off me with all the money that was in my pocket. Ideas, and she says, it's the type of job where you could open up your own salon. Well, my trousers nearly fell off me with the amount of money that I had imagined in my pocket. So I was made up, and then reality, she said, but don't ever forget where you came from. Imagine that, Greg, 46 years, I'm telling you that story, and that's the thing that I remember, So I couldn't possibly ever forget that. So she was the one that got me into it.
It's gas because I've watched nearly all of the videos here on the Salon Soul Brothers and Sisters, and a lot of people talk about remembering their first day in the salon and their first interview and stuff like that. I never had an interview. I never had a first day as such. It was just a gradual, occurrence as such. I was always in the salon as a young kid. When I was very small, Mum and Dad actually just had one car, and Dad used to have to, I don't know whether he tummed a lift or he got the bus up to Crumlin Shopping Centre, and Mum would have to pick him up on a Saturday evening. So we'd head up on a Saturday evening and he'd still have a few bits to do. He'd be finishing up and I'd be pottering around, cleaning the cups, sweeping the floor, sorting out the brushes. And some of the girls might be still there and they'd be doing their hair and their makeup and they'd be getting ready to be heading into town, And as like a 7-8-year-old girl sitting looking at this, I was just amazed by it all. I think the glitz and the glamour just sucked me in. I was sucked in then. And then as a teenager, I think I could have turned out to be a bit of a wild child. So I was brought into the salon to work as a way of keeping an eye on me. I think more so than I was too old. I was too old for a babysitter, so I was dragged into the salon. So anytime I wasn't in school, I was in work. So I had no Christmas holidays, no summer holidays. I was always in the salon. And I did resent it a little bit in the beginning, because all my friends were allowed to have their holidays and, you know, had their Saturdays off, whereas I was always in the salon. So it wasn't really until I started doing my training and started doing my classes that I realised that this is where I was meant to be, you know. We lived in Naas at the time, and we used to do our classes on a Wednesday evening up in Lucan, and Mum would throw me into the car 3:20, bring 1 or 2 of my friends with me up to the salon, and I'd be doing my classes maybe till 10, 11 o'clock at night, you know. And that's when I really kind of fell in love with it, just behind the chair, one-on-one with the client.
Wow. If I'm honest, and I wanted to be a fireman to start with. And it was something that, being back at school, when I was at school back in the late 80s, mid-80s, late 80s, you had to be a certain height, slightly unasthmatic, as I was, because I was very asthmatic at the time, and you couldn't go into that type of role. So I'd been looking around for a Saturday job at the time. And one of my mum's friends, so this is one of these my mum's friends, sisters, cousins type thing for a second, so bear with me. Her son had been working at a hairdressing salon. And she said, oh, he's going to give up his job in a few weeks' time. Do you want to take it on? He said, it's good money. He's paying 25 quid for a Saturday, and you have to do a Monday night as well, but that's only for like a couple of hours. So back in 1986, 87, 25 quid was good. And I was currently getting my hair cut, not by this guy that I ended up working for a short period, but with another guy who was a fantastic hairdresser that worked in a salon that was the trendy place to go to where I lived. So, and my mum had been going to him for years. And I think for a birthday treat, I'd gone to him as well. Hair looked fantastic, looked really, really good. And there's a reason why I'm telling you this, which I'll come back to you in a second. But they seem to be having a wild time in this salon as well, which is great. I got picked up from the end of my road, which I used to live out in the countryside, so out in the middle of nowhere, buses to have to get everywhere. But this guy used to pick me up in his car, drive me to his salon, and he'd bring me back home again. And usual sort of thing. First day there, he said to me, right, you need to get sweet, make teas and coffees, do this, that, and the other. Just general sort of housekeeping rules. And I started tidying up, cleaning up. But he used to cut hair and watch football at the same time. So he'd be literally, he'd be like this, flip it out, what's going on there? And you'd sit there, well, I'd be standing there watching him and thinking, God, this isn't bad. You get to watch football when you're working. I was like, that's a pretty good job. I did get him to cut my hair one time whilst the football was on. So funny enough, my haircut wasn't that great. It was a little bit off. I'd end up going back to see my mum's hairdresser, who cut it beautifully. And I'd said to my mum, I said, where did he do his training, this guy? And she went, oh, he did it at Vidal Sassoon. And I was like, well, I think I might jack in this job that I'm at and go there then. I didn't know who Sassoons were at the time either. I'm completely oblivious to the fashion world. So I applied to Sassoons. I rung them up back in the day when you could ring directly to people. And I just said, any jobs going? Gives a job type thing. And sent me an application form. Application form went off, and then I went up to Brook Street for an interview. Probably 30 people at that interview. And out of those 30 people that went for that particular interview, there was probably about 2 or 3 of us that got through from that. I went to the interviews, and they did the usual thing. I mean, I didn't know what to say. I was a little bit like, why do you want to get into it? And I was like, well, I think I enjoy the creative side of it. I want to have my own salon at some point, stuff like that. And it seemed to, whatever I said worked, because I finished school in beginning of July, I think it was. We had the 6-week period, and I started work in September.
It's probably no great surprise. My father was a hairdresser, as you pointed out. He had a great career in Petermark. He's retired now. And I suppose myself and Frank, my brother, just watched him. You know, we love him. You know, he's our hero. But you know, we watched him and his career and how much fun he seemed to be having, and it just seemed like a really, really cool option. We started part time at 15 and fell in love with it straight away. He wouldn't let us leave school. We had to go on to do our leavings, which I think was actually, you know, really beneficial when later on when we came to be, you know, open my own salon, etc. But fell in love with it straight away. And as soon as I left school at 18, I went full time and never looked back. But yeah, so when I was part time, I was in Rathfarnham, Peter Market Rathfarnham Shopping Centre. So I did 2 or 3 years there, summers and Christmas, etc. I actually started off at 14 in the Peter Mark Laundry. Myself and Richard Keaveney, Peter's son.
With Paul.
With Paul, yeah. But they threw us all in there because we wanted to go into salons. Well, we couldn't even reach the basins. And well, some might argue I can still barely reach a basin, but that's another. But so they threw us in the laundry for a couple of years. And then I went to Peter Mark Rathfarnham and then full time in hair and beauty under Lisa Brown for many years. I was very lucky because Lisa. And, you know, I started off as a trainee under her, and then I was a stylist under her, and then I became a trainee manager under her. So, yeah, it was great. It was a great salon at the time, and unfortunately,
it was something I was always passionate about. And I was very, very lucky to land a job in Carlow Town, and it was the biggest salon in Carlow Town at the time. But unfortunately, I lived 10 miles away. So I used to have to go out every morning at 7:30 and literally hitch a lift into Carlow Town and do my day's work and hitch back home. And I was at that for about a year before I got a bed sit in Carlow. And, you know, the pay was very, very low back then. And I was working 2 nights a week in a Chippers. And I was getting more for the 2 nights a week in Chippers than I was for getting my full week's wages doing hairdressing. And I just was so passionate about the hairdressing that I stuck with the hairdressing and just absolutely loved it. And it didn't bother me having to hitch the lift in and out. Now, in the middle of the winter, I was often on the road at 8 o'clock at night trying to get back home. But I stuck with it. I stayed with that salon for 18 years and I was very lucky. It was a very popular salon and the training was second to none. And I actually stayed with them for 18 years.
Well, let's just say I wasn't great at school and I didn't really have an interest in being there. I was more interested in having a crack down the back of the classroom. So Linda was like, you're coming to work with me on a Saturday. I'm not letting you lie in the bed all day. So I got Med come in as a punishment, but I think she failed there because then I wanted to be in there. I didn't want to be in school. So it was the argument, go to school. No, I'm going to work. So I wasn't mad at it at the start, but then once I done my first colour course, I absolutely fell in love with colour. And it just drove me to work even harder because I was one of these ones that used to run away from the basins. So then it was like, if you don't want to clean and wash hair, learn how to do colour and blow dry. So that was grand. I was out on the floor and I've never looked back since. And she done her first colour course when she was only 13. Pulled up at the train station. Get out and go to Dublin.
I sent her on the train on her own to Dublin to do a colour course. And when she came back home, I asked her what age was everyone there, and she told me they were all ancient.
It's natural. It's a natural part of my way because my parents was barbers. So I grew up in a salon, in a small shop, and I studied my school, studying in the back part of the salon, the shop, and I start quickly to understand the cut, men's cut, like a 15 years old, and then when I grew, I decided to change a little bit the way, study for the other part of the professional hairdressing, so women and the color and everything. Do everything part of what's needed for me because I like to be creative. Yeah, my mom is a light hand shave. She was very famous about the hand because the men's like the light hand when you shave it.
Sort of fell into it, Greg. I left school, didn't want to stay on to do A-levels, and my brother was a hairdresser. I suppose, you know, looked up to an older sibling and, you know, thought it looked really cool. Started in a salon. It wasn't with Alan at this stage. It was a small salon on the Lisburn Road, and suppose a bit disillusioned because it wasn't a progressive salon. So after being there, not quite for, well, a number of months, can't quite remember, wasn't a year anyway, left to go to the art college and, you know, did some art and photography and stuff like that, foundation and art. Didn't get beyond that, and then I was back into hairdressing, thank goodness. And it was a friend, suppose, wanted me to come work part-time in a salon that was quite a quirky salon in Queen's Arcade at the time, which I loved, and it gave me a little taster for it. And it was while I was there that, and also working in restaurants and stuff like that, not quite knowing what direction I was going in. One of the girls who worked for Alan Boyce at the time said, why don't you come and speak to him? And I knew it was a very progressive salon. I was a bit nervous about going. Of course, Paul came along with me. Paul and I were together at this stage. And he came along and Alan was more interested in him. He had already...
From a hairdressing perspective. For me, first of all, there's a number of factors that got me into the industry. But I think I probably always looked at the industry and seen it as something that potentially was a future for me. I used to go into hairdressing salons with my mother back in the 70s when I was a kid. And I just completely loved the glamour and the color. You got to remember what Belfast was like in the 70s. It was not pleasant. And I used to go in and, there was all these very camp men would be asking you, do you want a drink? And they wore great clothes and everything was really glamorous and exciting. And then your mum would get her hair done, you'd walk back out and be black and white again. That's the way I remember it. And in the early 80s, I was always playing about with my hair, doing my friend's hair, being just that kid who kind of people would go to if they wanted something done for the weekend. And eventually, I had my own hair bleached over the summer. I started out as being a roofing insulator in Bray, County Wicklow.
I still don't believe it.
I was a roofer. So I came back from the summer of 1983, went back to school, and I bleached my hair over the summer. And the Christian Brothers at that time said, we're not having that. Put it back to its natural color or get out. And there was a very good teacher there called Pat Darcy. And Pat said, color your hair and, let's see where we can go. And he said, what do you want to do with your life? And I said, I think I might want to be a hairdresser. But it was a throwaway comment. And he said, I'll see if I can help you get a job. And I think he probably kind of realized if I get this kid a job, it will get him out of trouble. Yeah. And that was it. I went to work in a hairdressing salon, 15 years of age, raw as bejesus. And the first thing I realized the minute I was in a salon was you could get tips from old women if you were nice to them. And the pound sign started to trigger. And I just loved the atmosphere, I just wanted to cut hair right away. I just thought, this is where I'm going to be for the rest of my life. I lasted 3 months because I burnt a woman's head. That's another story.
Well, it's a question I get asked a lot, Greg, right? And I found myself in a position, and this is the story of my life, finding myself in positions. I found myself in a position that I left school at 15. I was in a situation that I suppose I was older than my years at 15 due to, I suppose you could say, a very difficult childhood. And I became very independent very young. So I started my working life at 8 years of age. When I came to 15, I was DJing 3 clubs in town weekend. Initially I wanted to be in the arts or fashion design or something like that. Never even considered hairdressing. And I went down into Anco and I met this lovely woman and I sat in, I said, look, I don't know what to do. I've just left school and I want to do something. And she said, well, I know this Scottish man, she said, called Hugh Campbell, has a salon in Limerick. And she said, I'll just give him a call. She picked up the phone. She rang Hugh Campbell's salon. Grand. She said, go on up to him there. So I made my way, which was about 4 blocks up the road, to just become the Hugh Campbell hair studio then. So I arrived downstairs and I sat on this semicircular couch facing Hugh Campbell, right? And he left me on the couch for 4 hours, right? And I watched him cut hair for 4 hours. Like, I was mesmerized. There was no such thing as a mobile phone, of course. It was 1985. So all I could do was sit there and watch. But I was in this electric atmosphere. full of buzzy people buzzing around, looking sensational. Hugh Campbell was, you know, commanding the place at the top on a stool, cutting women's hair. And I watched him for 4 hours. Okay. And then he came over and he sat with me and he said, "Do you want to be a hairdresser?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "I'll see you Tuesday morning at 8:45 here in the salon." Right. Where look smart. Right. That was my one and only interview in my entire life.
I always wanted to be a hairdresser. Like, I mean, I don't really remember wanting to do anything else. I think possibly at one stage I might have wanted to be like a PR for maybe the music industry, for concerts and gigs and maybe organizational side of things. But from as long as I can remember, and as soon as I could get cutting the dolly heads and the girls' world and chopping all my dolls' hairs off, as long as I can remember, I always wanted to be a hairdresser. And I also used to go knocking on the neighbours' doors and ask, could I do their hairs when hot brushes and tongs were in the day. And I do remember getting a hot brush cut in someone's hair. So that's just like, I had to cut the hair out of that one. I think I was about 12, 13. I actually used to remember writing letters to the hair salons in Newton Ards, literally begging them for a Saturday job. I did do that. I remember doing that, you know. It started off in a salon called Slicks, and it was in North Street in Newton Ards, which is from the town that I grew up in. And I worked there for £4 all day Saturday. And then I worked for a guy, there's a shopping centre in Newton Ards, and there was an area called the Village Square, and there was a salon in there, and I worked there for a man called Brian Small, and he named his salon David Ryan, which is after his two sons, David and Ryan. And then he moved his business to the High Street in Newton Ards, so I worked for him there briefly. And then there was a man called Robert Lawrence, and I worked for him in South Street in Newton Ards. And he opened up a second salon, so I worked between the two, just depending wherever I was needed. And then I remember asking Lawrence, I was honest with him, as I always am, and just said, look, I want to go and work in Belfast, the big city with the bright lights, and I wanted to work there. And where would you recommend that I go to? So I worked for a man called John Anderson, and it was the place where all the ladies that did lunch and sort of a really high-end salon in Belfast and Wellington Place. I worked for John Anderson for 2 years.
I suppose it might sound a bit like cliche, but I think hairdressing chose me. In school, I never wanted to be, I hadn't got this dream or vision of being a hairdresser. I didn't own a hairdryer. I was very sporty. My hair was always up in a ponytail. And that time, we didn't blow dry our hair going into school. You just washed it in the morning and you went in with a wet head. I always wanted to be an architect. I loved shapes and degrees and lines, and I loved working with my hands. So maybe that's where the hairdressing came into it. But I did have a part-time job from, I think, about third year. And strangely enough, it's the salon was across the road from where Vanilla is now. There was a lady there at the time, Breda, and she gave me a Saturday job. Now, Breda's would have been, the best salon in Tullow. Actually, Maria from Berlin and Carlo is her daughter. So Breda took me on as a Saturday girl. And the first day I was so nervous. Like, I didn't drink tea or coffee, so I didn't know how to make tea or coffee. I was pretty sure I couldn't sweep a floor properly, and I hated speaking to people. I was very, very shy. So a story about that day, of course you go in and this is what we do and this is how it works. And as I was cleaning, your first day on the job, you're doing loads of cleaning, and there was a rough edge on one of the mirrors. And it's mad, every time, I speak, I look down at my finger and it reminds me of it, but I kind of hit it off the edge and it started to bleed. And I was so nervous because I wanted to make such a good impression that I went around all day with kitchen towel, tissue paper. As I was cleaning, I was kind of cleaning the little speckles of blood. And at that time as well, when you were washing hair, as we all remember, you know, there was no hair care as such. It was all like apple, nearly like washing up liquid shampoo. So that didn't kind of help either, but I survived, and I was with Breda for a couple of years. And I suppose after my leaving cert, I did still want to do architecture, but I didn't want to move to Dublin. So I then went for an interview in Blake's in Carlow, and I got the job. And I think I was there for about a year when Linda Marr approached me. She was opening up a salon in Tullow, and she asked me to come work as a trainee there. And I suppose the rest is history.
My mother got me the job. It was simple as that. I was in school. I was probably the same, like a lot of people. I wasn't academic. I wasn't. I was a messer. I got suspended in school, and then she was like saying, you need to get a trade, because I knew the inevitable was coming, that I wasn't going to last in school. So she was up in the local Peter Mark and Dunleary shopping centre, and she organised an interview for me, but I didn't know about it. So she sent me up to get a haircut, which was funny because in those days you used to go to the barbers twice a year and get sheared like a sheep, and then you'd be like, wait till the hair grew again. So she sent me up to Jared Casey, if you remember.
Yeah, no, Jared.
Up in Jared, hello, Jared, how are you? And Jared Casey was the manager at the time, and I got my hair cut. And he came over to me and said, I believe you want to be in a hairdresser, Dylan. And I was just looking around, and I'll never forget, I was in a Christian Brothers at the time. And I remember looking at all these fucking gorgeous girls with short skirts and big boobs and the whole lot. And I was like, oh, I'll give it a go. Jesus Christ. Absolutely. Look at the, you know, and that was the thing. I was a 15-year-old boy who just, you know, was in love with it, most of the girls that were walking around the place in the salon. So I just said, absolutely. And that's how it started, you know. So it was never a destiny. It was never a destiny. It was just chasing the skirt.
As a trainee, though, Dylan, did you naturally get the hair?
No,
or
I didn't
work hard at it.
I had to work really hard at it. Yeah. I remember, you know, I just couldn't get my head around it. I loved the job. I worked so hard, but actually the actual hairdressing side of it just wasn't kicking in for me. I was so slow at getting it right, and it just was awkward. But I worked extra hard, you know, and that's the thing. And that's what I say to anybody that comes in. If you're a grafter, anybody that comes into the salon working, it mightn't be the most gifted in the world, but if they're a grafter, then you've got something to work with. If they're passionate and they want to make people happy and they're just looking after the clients really well, I'm going to work my arse off them. Now, we're unlucky sometimes. You get some people it's just not for them. But I think you can, if you've got commitment, that's all you need. And I was committed, and I worked my arse off, and I loved it. And to be honest with you, it was funny. My first day working in the salon, I'll just say to you, like I went into the staff room and had the tinfoil sandwiches my mother made me that day. And one of the lads says to the other fella, remember those days, the staff rooms were the size of the table, you know? Yeah. So I went in, and one of the lads says, oh God, you should have seen the ride I was with last night. And I was like, Jesus, man, you know, like he was that size, right? And I nearly puked on my sandwiches, right? Wiggling his finger. He was that size, right? So I went outside and was eating my sandwich, walking around the Leary shop centre going, like, the big gays in there, they're going to try and have sex with me, right? In my head, right? And tell you what, they're like the oldest friends that I have to this day, you know? It was brilliant. It's just full of different types of people and colourful folk, you know, from all different backgrounds. And I just knew the day I started, I love this and love the people that I worked with. But also, I love the clients, and that's the thing. It's service, you know, just to make people feel good.
Well, you know, I often tell this story, but it's so simple. I was always pulled towards arts, music and stuff. So I was always on the creative side. So it was a matter of finding myself and where I belonged in a career path. But the simplest thing was I used to run about with a guy in Glasgow, and his brother was a hairdresser, Billy Smith. And Billy was a great hairdresser, but my God, he looked cool. And when you're at 16 and you looked at Billy in his leather trousers, at that period, that was the thing. And Billy used to get all the girls, and he used to go, oh God, I want to be like Billy. So we kind of, there was a looking up thing. So then I got a Saturday job, because I thought if you get a job in a salon, then you could be like Billy, but I soon realised there was a bit more to it. So I worked in a salon in Glasgow for a while. And then when we moved back to Ireland, what happened is I was working on the sites for a while, and I says, this is not for me. And then I went into the town, had a wee nosy about it, I went then, and I says, it was a girl, she was in the town, she's very well established, she was the best salon in the town at the time, Gabriel. She was a kind of legend up here. But I went in anyway, and she took me on, and from there it just evolved and grew, and it just naturally came, and it was brilliant. It was just amazing.
And you done all our training with that lady?
I did all the training with that lady. Then I went to London for a while. So I did kind of worked in a few kind of individual salons and stuff like that there. And then I came back again, and I actually set up my business very, very young. It was 18 years of age.